In the vast and endless stretches of sand and stone, the sun slowly rises above the dunes. It does not rush. The first light touches the tops of the date palms, the silent tents of woven goat hair, and the sleeping camels resting on their folded legs. Somewhere near a small oasis, a tribe begins to stir. Not quickly. Just a few quiet movements here and there. A pot clinks. A child rolls over on a mat. The fire has gone out but left a whisper of smoke. Life in ancient Arabia was not loud. It moved like the wind, steady, soft, and patient. The Bedouin tribes of the desert had no reason to hurry. There was water to find, of course. And the goats had to be walked to where the dry grass still grew. But these were matters of rhythm, not urgency. Every day was a repetition of the one before it, and of the one that would follow. The sun, the sand, the stars, they did not change. Inside one of the larger tents, made from the thick black wool of goats, lives a man named Hadi. He is not young, but not old either. His beard is full and dark, and his skin is the color of baked earth. Hadi sleeps next to his wife, Layla, who is already awake. She listens to the wind brushing the side of the tent. There is no need to speak yet. She is weaving. Her fingers move slowly, repeating the same patterns taught to her by her mother and her mother's mother. Outside, Hadi's son, Jamil, begins to stretch. He has just turned 13, and today, like every other day, he will walk the camels to the far ridge and back. It is a quiet task. The camels do not need to be told where to go. They have done this path 100 times. Perhaps more. Sometimes, Jamil hums to himself. But most of the time, he just walks. The desert is not empty. Not really. The air carries sounds, the whisper of distant animals, the soft pad of paws on sand, the calls of birds overhead. But these things are part of the silence, not breaks in it. Ancient Arabian life was lived between these sounds, in the spaces of time that most would find boring. But for them, it was peace. Breakfast is simple: flatbread, dates, and a bit of goat milk. Layla serves it with the same movements she used yesterday. Hadi eats quietly. There is no rush. The sun is already high now, casting long shadows of the tents and the palm trees. There is shade under the acacia trees, and that is where the elders sit. They do not talk much. Just a few words about weather, or news from a traveling merchant. That merchant, if he comes today, might bring silk or salt or news from faraway cities like Damascus or Mecca. But if he doesn't come, that's all right. There is still the weaving to be done, the goats to be milked, the leather to be mended. These things do not change. And so, the day unfolds like a rug, soft, detailed, slow. There is no noise. No drama. Just the steady rhythm of ancient desert life. The sun, now higher in the sky, warms the tents and the people beneath them. The desert air is dry, but not harsh. It wraps around the village like an old blanket, one that everyone has grown used to. People do not speak loudly here. They let the wind do the talking, and it always has something to say, rustling the date palms, brushing across the sand, or softly creaking the ropes of the tents. Layla, still weaving, sits in the shade just outside her tent. Her fingers move as if they remember on their own, creating geometric shapes and gentle lines in the fabric. The colors are natural: soft brown, muted red, a faded black. She hums a quiet tune that her grandmother used to sing while weaving the same patterns. It's not a song with words, just a rhythm. It matches the mood of the desert. Hadi tends to a small leather pouch, repairing its seams with a bone needle. The leather is old, but strong, made from camel hide softened by smoke and oil. He does not speak. The work is slow and simple. His eyes squint slightly as he threads the sinew, pulling it tight. He works with the same care he gives to everything, because in the desert, things are not easily replaced. Nearby, a few goats nudge at dry bushes, searching for something to nibble. A young girl named Yasmin watches them. She is no older than 8, wearing a long, dust-colored robe. Her feet are bare. She carries a stick, not to strike, but to guide. Her job is quiet. The goats move slowly, and so does she. In the distance, Jamil returns with the camels. Their large feet press into the sand, leaving behind deep, soft footprints that will be gone by morning. One camel grumbles gently, but Jamil does not mind. He pats its neck and leads it to the shade where water has been poured into a worn clay basin. The camels drink slowly, their long necks dipping in rhythm. In the center of the camp, a fire is started, not for warmth, but for tea. Water is boiled in a blackened kettle, and crushed cardamom is added. The scent rises, mixing with the dry air. The elders gather, their robes pale from the sun. They do not need to ask each other how the day is going. It is going as it always has. One elder tells a story. His voice is steady, like the wind. He speaks of a sandstorm that once came from the east, fierce and sudden. But his tone is not fearful, he tells it like a memory, not a warning. The children gather near, half listening, half dozing. They have heard this story before. That makes it better. By afternoon, the light begins to turn golden. Shadows stretch long across the sand. The chores slow down. The goats are tied near the tents, and the camels rest with their legs tucked under them. The desert cools. The heat slips away, not all at once, but gently, like a blanket being lifted. Layla finishes her weaving for the day and rolls up the fabric. Hadi puts away his tools. The fire is fed once more, and another pot of tea is brewed. The tribe will eat a meal of rice, dates, and meat, small portions, shared with care. No one is in a hurry. As the stars begin to appear, one by one, the desert quiets again. The wind becomes softer, as if whispering secrets to the dunes. People gather near their tents, speaking in low voices, or saying nothing at all. And above it all, the sky stretches wide, so full of stars that it almost hums. The night begins, the desert morning does not begin with noise. It begins with stillness. Long before the sun appears, the stars are still thick in the sky, hanging motionless above the dunes. A pale silver light rests gently on the sand, and a coolness lingers that will vanish in just a few hours. This is the quietest part of the day. In the camp, the first sounds are small. The soft clinking of metal as an old kettle is placed on coals. A quiet cough from one of the elders, muffled by the fabric of the tent. Somewhere, a camel snorts in its sleep, shifting its weight with a sigh. No one speaks yet. Words will come later. Layla rises early. She wraps her shawl around her shoulders and steps into the dawn. The fabric of her clothing is simple, but every stitch was placed with care. She moves slowly, with no urgency, as though the day itself is waiting for her. She takes the kettle and pours the tea, just a little, into a small clay cup. The steam rises and disappears into the cold air. Hadi is already awake. He has taken the goats a short way from the tents. Their small hooves make delicate prints in the sand, like tiny written letters. He watches them without needing to control them. They know where to go. They always return. Hadi runs his hand along the edge of a nearby dune, letting the sand slip through his fingers. Jamil prepares the saddle for the morning ride. One camel will be taken to check the nearby well, a short journey, but still important. The leather straps creak as he tightens them. His movements are unhurried. He hums a soundless tune, something only he can hear. His fingers know this work like they know the back of his hand. Inside one of the tents, an older woman grinds grain with a stone. The circular motion of her hands is steady, endless, like a wheel that turns without beginning or end. She pauses only to shift her position, then continues. The sound is rhythmic, a soft scraping that blends into the silence around her. The children begin to stir. Their small voices break the hush like the first birdsong of the morning. Not loud, just present. They emerge one by one from the tents, eyes still heavy with sleep, hair tangled by the night. They are handed pieces of flatbread, still warm from the fire. They eat slowly, watching the sunrise, as if seeing it for the first time. The sun appears without drama. It simply rises. A soft gold creeps across the dunes, turning the cold sand warm. Shadows pull back. The desert awakens not with a start, but with a stretch. Smoke from the morning fire drifts lazily into the air. The scent of burning wood and hot tea fills the camp. No one rushes. There is no schedule, no bells to ring. The day will happen whether they hurry or not. As the sun climbs higher, the chores begin again. The tents are adjusted to block the coming heat. Water skins are checked. Ropes are tightened. Each task is small, but necessary. The people do not speak of the future or worry about what comes next. They live inside each moment like it is a room with no door. In the distance, the horizon begins to shimmer. It is a sign that the day will be hot. But no one comments. They have known this land for generations. The heat is a visitor they expect. And so, the people move through the morning, slow, steady, and without complaint. The desert watches them, silent and wide. As the sun rises higher into the sky, its heat thickens. The air itself seems to hum softly with warmth. The desert no longer feels quiet but heavy, as if each grain of sand is pressing gently into place. Movement slows. Even the wind retreats, hiding somewhere behind the dunes. This is midday. In the camp, the shadows of the tents grow shorter and then begin to stretch again in the opposite direction. Time is marked not by clocks, but by the shape of light. A camel lifts its head slowly, blinking against the brightness, then lowers it again. It does not waste energy. It knows how long the sun will stay. Layla moves beneath the canopy, arranging dates in a wooden bowl. She presses each one with her fingers, checking softness. Some are firm, others melting. She does not speak. She only works. The bowl is set in the center of a woven mat, a simple circle surrounded by silence. Jamil sharpens a knife using a small stone. The motion is methodical. One side. Then the other. One side again. His eyes remain on the blade, but his mind is elsewhere. Perhaps thinking of the last hunt, or the shape of an old mountain far away. The sound of the sharpening is steady, not sharp. It blends into the warmth of the afternoon like a whisper. A child walks across the sand, carrying a small clay pot filled with water. The pot is not heavy, but the child walks slowly anyway. Each step is careful. There is no need to spill. The water is for the animals. A small gift of coolness in a world of heat. Inside one of the tents, a woman weaves. The loom is quiet, but the thread sings gently as it stretches. Over and under. Over and under. Her fingers follow patterns passed down through generations, though she does not look at them. She stares past the cloth, past the tent walls, as though watching the horizon inside her own thoughts. Even the birds have gone quiet. A hawk circles above, high in the sky, where the heat looks like rippling water. It makes no sound. Below, the goats gather in a patch of shadow behind a rock. Their heads are low, and they rest together, breathing slowly, eyes half closed. No one eats much during midday. A few dates. A piece of bread. A sip of tea cooled from morning. Meals are larger at dusk, when the sun has begun to fall. Now is not the time for feasting. Now is the time for stillness. The older men of the camp sit in a half circle, saying little. They drink bitter coffee from small cups without handles. The coffee is thick, earthy, filled with spices. They do not drink it quickly. They sip and pause, looking into the distance. Sometimes one of them speaks, but always softly. Sometimes they do not speak at all. Words are like water. Rare. Valuable. A tent flap moves gently in the breeze. It is the only thing moving. Everything else is still. Time slows. The sand no longer shifts. The world holds its breath. This is not a time for doing. It is a time for being. And in that silence, there is a kind of rest. The sun remains high, but soon it will begin to fall. When it does, life will begin again. But for now, the people of the desert sit quietly beneath the sky, surrounded by heat, shadows, and peace. As the sun begins its slow descent, the desert changes once more. The heat that once pressed down begins to lift, not suddenly, but gently, like a blanket being folded back. The sky lightens at the edges, turning from white gold to soft orange. Shadows grow longer. The world begins to move again, but not quickly. In the distance, a dog barks once, then is silent. It has sensed something, or perhaps it simply welcomes the cooler air. A breeze stirs the edges of the tents, lifting a corner here, a flap there. Sand moves again, dancing in tiny spirals. Layla begins preparing the evening meal. There is no hurry. She soaks lentils in water, peels garlic with the side of her thumb, and places a flat stone near the fire to warm. Her movements are practiced. She does not think about each step. Her hands know what to do. The fire is small but steady. Smoke rises in a straight line before bending softly in the breeze. Jamil feeds the goats by hand. He speaks to them, not in words of command, but in low murmurs. The goats nudge his palms gently. One of them bleats, soft and short. The sound barely carries. The camp is not loud. It never is. Everything happens quietly here. Children return from wherever they've been. Some come from the dunes, where they gathered dried brush. Others have been watching lizards in the rocks or making patterns in the sand with sticks. They do not run, but they move with energy now, their stillness replaced with soft laughter and simple tasks. A man pours water from one jug into another, letting it fall from height so that it cools in the air. The sound of it, soft, steady, joins the low crackle of the fire and the rustle of fabric in the wind. These are the sounds of the evening, quiet but alive. Inside one of the tents, a girl braids her sister's hair. She does not speak. The braid is long, thick, and dark. Her fingers work in rhythm with the sounds outside. A mother hums as she mends a shirt, her needle rising and falling like the breath of the desert itself. The old men speak more now, though still softly. They sit on rugs, cups in hand. Stories drift among them like smoke, not dramatic tales, but gentle memories, the taste of figs last season, the shape of a distant mountain, the name of a cousin's cousin. Time stretches. There is no need to finish a story quickly. No one interrupts. There is always time. Above, the sky turns amber, then pink. Stars begin to appear. Not many at first, just one or two, like cautious guests arriving early. Soon, more will come. But for now, the horizon holds the last light of the day, and the people of the desert prepare for evening. The bread is placed on the hot stone. It hisses faintly, puffing just slightly. A pot of lentils simmers, bubbling slowly. The scent of garlic and cumin drifts across the sand. These are not feasts. They are simple meals. But in this place, under this sky, they are enough. And when the food is ready, they will sit in a circle. Not because of ritual, but because it feels right. They will eat with their hands, share from the same bowl, and speak quietly. Not every night is like this. But many are. Enough to remember. The sun dips low. The sky deepens. The day, once bright and hot, becomes gentle and cool. Another night approaches, calm and unhurried. And the desert, as always, listens. The night has come. Not suddenly, but fully. The last light of the sun has faded beyond the dunes, and now the stars stretch above in silence. There is no moon tonight, only the countless small points of light that have guided travelers and dreamers for generations. The camp is quiet again. The children have eaten and now lie near their parents, eyes heavy. Some still whisper, soft voices blending with the night breeze. Others have already fallen asleep, curled beneath light blankets, their chests rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Layla washes the last of the bowls in a shallow basin. The water is cool. She works without speaking, her hands moving slowly. Afterward, she sits beside Jamil, their shoulders touching gently. They do not speak either. Not out of silence, but out of fullness. The day has been long, but not rushed. And now, at its end, there is no need for more words. From the dark, a desert owl calls once, then again. Its sound is low and distant, not alarming but ancient. Jamil looks upward, as he often does at night. He follows the patterns of the stars, names them softly to himself, not for learning, but remembering. His grandfather once pointed out the same constellations, in the same sky. They have not changed. A single lantern glows inside one tent. Its light flickers against the fabric, casting a dim gold. Inside, an old woman hums a lullaby. Her voice is soft and low, the kind that has no beginning and no end. She hums not for the children, but for herself, a habit formed long ago, from a time when she, too, was small and uncertain of the dark. The air is cool now. Not cold, but enough to bring closeness. A few people sit close to the fire, wrapped in shawls, speaking in murmurs. They pass a warm pot of tea, pouring it into small cups. The tea smells of mint and desert herbs. Steam curls upward in the firelight. A trader, passing through, sits nearby. He shares a story from a distant oasis, a tale of rare dates that taste like honey and a well that sings when drawn from. The others listen, not because the story is important, but because it passes time in the best way, slowly, softly, with gentle wonder. The sand cools underfoot. It no longer shifts with heat. Now it holds still, calm and firm. Footsteps make no sound. A young boy walks barefoot through the edges of the camp, counting stars. He doesn't know all the numbers, but it doesn't matter. He counts until sleep pulls him back to his blanket. The goats settle too. They curl together near a rock, their bodies still, their ears twitching from time to time. Even the animals seem quieter under these stars. The desert teaches them to rest when the light fades. Far in the distance, a camel grumbles. It is a comforting sound. The kind of sound that belongs to the night, to the open world, to the quiet life of those who live under endless sky. And as the fire burns lower, as voices fade and lanterns are dimmed, the camp sinks deeper into stillness. The stars above remain, silent watchers, unchanged by time. The desert sleeps, as it has always slept, in long, unhurried rhythm. Tomorrow will come, just as slowly. But for now, only the stars move. And even they take their time. The desert morning arrives quietly. There is no sudden light, no sharp noise. Just a slow change in the color of the sky, from deep black to soft blue-gray. The stars begin to fade, one by one, as if they are stepping back behind a curtain. The wind is still. Even the sand seems to hold its breath. Layla is the first to rise. She has always liked this hour, when the world is neither night nor day. Her steps are light on the cool ground. She does not rush. She walks to the edge of the camp, where the land stretches flat and empty in all directions. She listens. There is nothing, no animals, no voices, no movement. Only the quiet that comes before everything else. She begins to gather sticks, dried bits of desert wood blown in from elsewhere. The fire has gone out during the night, and soon others will want warmth. She does not wake anyone. There is no need. Everyone rises when they are ready. Time is not something to chase here. One by one, the others stir. Jamil sits up, blinking slowly. His back is stiff from the ground, but he doesn't mind. He rolls his shoulders and watches Layla in the distance. He smiles, not with his mouth, but with his eyes. She always begins the day before him. A goat bleats softly. Then another. They have sensed the change in light. They stand and stretch, shaking sleep from their limbs. The oldest among them walks to the water basin and waits. She knows the routine. Children emerge from blankets, blinking and yawning. Some rub their eyes, others sit quietly and stare at the changing sky. One boy wraps himself in a blanket and follows Layla, not to help, just to be near. He doesn't speak. She doesn't mind. The fire is lit again, small and careful. The dry wood crackles softly. A small pot is placed over it, filled with water and a handful of herbs. The scent rises slowly, warm, earthy, familiar. It smells like every morning before it. Old Sammy rises last. He always does. His joints are slow, but his mind is awake. He moves with the help of a walking stick made from a tree no one remembers planting. He sits near the fire and nods once to everyone. That is enough. Someone hums. It might be a tune. It might be nothing. But it fits. It moves gently through the camp like morning wind. The sun is not yet above the dunes, but the light has changed again. Shadows stretch longer, softer. The sky is no longer gray but touched with pale gold. Birds begin to call, not loud, but clear. A sign that the desert will soon warm. A flat round bread is made and passed around, piece by piece. It is eaten with fingers, dipped in oil and herbs. No one speaks much. Words are saved for later, when the heat makes silence harder to find. A trader's camel grunts nearby. He readies his pack, brushing sand from leather straps, checking jars of spice and dates. He will leave soon, moving west with the sun. He offers tea before he goes. It is polite, and always accepted. As the light strengthens, the camp becomes more itself. Tents are adjusted, ropes tightened, belongings checked. Children play quietly, drawing shapes in the sand with sticks. The marks won't last long, but that doesn't matter. Nothing in the desert is meant to stay. The heat is still an hour away, but already it can be felt in the air, not heat itself, but the promise of it. The kind that presses slowly, never in a hurry, yet always certain. But for now, there is still calm. A short window of stillness, soft as the light that surrounds them. The people of the camp stretch, breathe, and prepare. Another day begins, not with noise, but with patience. As the sun rises higher, the desert begins to speak, not with words, but with movement. The wind picks up, soft and playful, lifting grains of sand and drawing lines across the earth. These lines shift constantly, never the same twice. Some say they are stories, written by the land itself. Others say they are only the desert breathing. In the center of the camp, Layla sits beneath a cloth canopy. She holds a small basket of wool threads dyed with crushed plants and earth. Her hands move slowly, weaving the threads into patterns passed down from mother to daughter, from memory more than sight. Her fingers know the way. Next to her, a younger girl watches. She is quiet, but her eyes are full of questions. Layla says nothing at first. Then she begins to explain, not with instructions, but with a story. The patterns are not just decoration. They are maps, tales of water wells, stars, and journeys long past. Each color has meaning. Each knot a purpose. Elsewhere, Jamil checks the ropes that hold their water skins. He unties them, feels the weight, and listens to the sound of sloshing inside. The water is still cool, drawn from a deep well days before. He tightens the knots again, slowly, making sure nothing will spill. In the desert, every drop is a treasure. In the shade of a tent, old Sammy tells a tale to two boys too young to work but old enough to sit still. His voice is soft, his tone even, never rising. He speaks of a tribe that once followed a black hawk across the dunes, believing it would lead them to a hidden spring. Whether the spring was ever found doesn't matter. The story has value because it is told. The trader who shared tea that morning has already left. His footprints are fading, swept away by the wind. No one tries to follow. He knows his way. And the desert, in its own time, will cover his passing as it always does. Women sit in a circle, their faces shaded by thin veils. They grind dried herbs into powder, mixing them for later use, to treat a cough, to help sleep, to cool the body. Each knows the mixtures by heart. The smells rise into the air, soft and bitter, like the wind carrying distant memories. Children chase each other around a sleeping goat, their laughter rising and falling with the breeze. They kick up dust, but no one scolds them. Dust is part of life. It settles on everything and is brushed away with calm hands. Near the edge of the camp, a man carves into a flat stone with a small blade. Not words, but symbols. Some are old, older than he can explain. He says little as he works. Some believe these marks bring good fortune. Others simply find peace in the repetition. The sky above is pale now, almost white. Heat begins to press down, not harsh, but steady. It makes people slow their movements, shorten their steps. There is no rush. In the desert, haste is never wise. A cloth is laid on the sand, and simple food is placed on it: olives, dates, flatbread, and dried figs. The camp gathers around in silence. Meals are not loud here. They are shared with respect. The sound of chewing, the creak of leather, the soft clink of pottery, these are the voices of the midday rest. After the meal, people stretch out in the shade. Some close their eyes. Others stare at the shifting tent fabric above them. The heat will grow stronger soon. But for now, there is time to be still. Patterns in the sand continue to move, redrawn by the wind. No one tries to stop it. The desert writes its own story every day, and the people simply live within its pages. As the sun climbs past its highest point, the shadows in the camp grow longer. They stretch slowly across the ground, like soft fingers reaching outward. In this part of the day, everything begins to quiet, even the wind. There is no need to speak much. The air is heavy, but not in a painful way. It simply asks for patience. Near the edge of the camp, old rugs are draped over low branches to create shade for the goats. The animals lie close together, their sides rising and falling with slow breaths. Flies buzz lazily around them, but no one swats them away. Even the flies are tired in this hour. Layla sits again with her weaving, though her hands now move slower. The younger girl has taken up her own thread, attempting to copy the patterns. One knot wrong. Another too tight. But Layla does not correct her. The girl will learn, not by being told, but by doing it many times. This is the way of the desert. Learning comes with repetition and quiet mistakes. Jamil has taken off his sandals and is walking barefoot through the fine sand near the dunes. The sand is hot, but not yet unbearable. He lets it slip between his toes, watching the way it piles and falls again. There is something meditative in watching sand move. It teaches him that nothing stays the same. From inside a tent, a low rhythm begins. A soft drum, struck not with power but with care. A woman sits with her knees folded beneath her, tapping the hide with the tips of her fingers. She is not playing for anyone. Just passing time. The beat is steady, like a heart. No song follows, only the rhythm. A small boy gathers pebbles and arranges them in a circle. Then a line. Then a square. No one asks why. Children often make patterns without knowing why they do it. Some say it is because the land itself teaches this habit, lines in the sand, trails in the stars. The men of the camp talk little. They lie on rolled mats and squint at the pale sky. Occasionally, one of them says something, a few words about the goats, or a wind they once knew. No one replies quickly. Words do not rush in this place. They appear when needed, not when expected. At the well, two women draw water in silence. The rope creaks. The bucket splashes. Water is poured into jars lined with cloth. The sound of water is soft, but it fills the space like a gentle song. The women do not hurry. In the heat, movement becomes intentional. Time feels different here. It does not tick forward. It expands and contracts with the sun, the shade, the hunger of the goats, the silence of the people. No one carries a clock. They carry habit, memory, and the position of the sun. Even the fire used for cooking is different now. The flames are small. Just enough heat to warm spiced milk or soften bread. Smoke rises slowly, curling upward and disappearing into the dry sky. It smells faintly of herbs and ash, a scent that clings to clothing and stays long after the fire is gone. As the afternoon deepens, the desert holds its breath. The air becomes still. Even the birds that passed high overhead earlier in the day have gone. Only the distant hum of wind against the dunes reminds the people that the land is always alive. There is no sense of urgency. The day will pass as it always has. Shadows will grow longer, and eventually, the stars will return. Until then, there is waiting. Resting. Breathing. And the knowledge that in this place, being still is not wasting time, it is honoring it. As the sun begins its slow descent, a soft golden light spreads across the sand. The temperature finally begins to drop, and with it comes a quiet shift in the rhythm of the camp. People who had spent hours in the shade begin to stir, stretching limbs and gathering their tools. The quiet hum of the afternoon starts to fade, replaced by the quiet preparations for the evening meal. Fatima, the elder woman of the camp, rises from her woven mat and begins gathering the ingredients she had measured out earlier in the day. A small pile of lentils. A handful of dried herbs wrapped in cloth. A few preserved lemons, wrinkled from the sun but still fragrant. The pot she uses is dark with use, its surface smooth from years of slow fires and simple meals. The children help in small ways. One brings water from the clay jar, carefully balanced with both hands. Another gathers dry twigs from the edge of the camp, snapping them gently to make them fit beneath the cooking stones. They are quiet, as if they know the importance of this hour. The fire is built low and narrow, just enough to boil the lentils and warm the flatbread that had been wrapped in cloth since morning. The men begin to return from watching the herds. Their feet are dusty, their faces shaded by simple scarves. They greet one another not with loud voices, but with nods and a few quiet words. They do not ask what is for dinner. They know what is there. And they are grateful for it. A pot is placed over the fire. Steam begins to rise as the water inside heats. The smell of lentils softens the air, mixing with the scent of wood smoke and dust. Bread is unwrapped and placed near the fire, warming slowly, the edges becoming slightly crisp. Nearby, Jamil helps his sister grind a small bowl of spices with a smooth stone. Coriander, cumin, and dried garlic. The scent rises as the mixture is crushed, earthy and warm. These spices are not used in abundance, just a pinch here and there, but they remind everyone of meals from days long past. As the meal cooks, the camp grows more active but not noisy. A woman sings softly to herself while folding cloth. Two boys carve small pieces of wood with rounded knives, shaping them into toys or tools or perhaps just shapes. There is no rush. Nothing is demanded of them at this hour. When the food is ready, it is not served on plates. Instead, a large cloth is spread on the ground. The pot is placed in the center, and around it, the family gathers. Everyone tears small pieces of bread and dips it gently into the lentils. No one takes more than they need. The meal is simple, but it is enough. There is something sacred in the act of eating together. It is not spoken of as sacred, but it is felt. The way people sit close without crowding. The way elders are served first. The way silence is allowed to sit between bites. Stories may be shared, but they are soft, like the wind against the tent walls. After the meal, the cloth is shaken out, and the last bits of food are offered to the dogs who rest at the edge of the camp. They wag their tails but do not bark. Even they seem to understand the peace of this hour. The sun has nearly disappeared now, casting long shadows that stretch across the dunes. The fire is reduced to embers. People begin to settle again. Not for sleep yet, but for the quiet time before night fully arrives. Some will sip spiced tea. Others will simply sit, watching the last of the light disappear. There is no rush to end the day. In the desert, the evening unfolds slowly, like a rug being unrolled across the sand, soft, deliberate, and familiar. Life in ancient Arabia was deeply influenced by the harsh desert environment. People had to adapt to extreme heat during the day and cold at night. Their clothing reflected this need. Loose robes and head coverings helped protect them from the sun's scorching rays, while at night these layers also provided warmth. Water was precious and scarce, so finding and preserving it was a constant concern. Wells and natural springs became vital gathering points for communities. Trade caravans traveled long distances across the desert, bringing goods like spices, incense, and textiles. These caravans also carried stories and news, connecting distant tribes and cities. Camels, known as the ships of the desert, were essential for transport because they could endure long journeys with little water. In ancient Arabian society, family and tribe were the cornerstones of social life. People's identities were closely tied to their tribal affiliations. Loyalty to one's tribe meant protection and support, but it could also mean involvement in feuds or conflicts. Tribal leaders, often called sheikhs, wielded significant influence, making decisions that affected everyone in their group. Hospitality was a highly valued virtue. Visitors were welcomed warmly, offered food and shelter, no matter how poor the hosts might be. This tradition was both a social rule and a survival strategy in a harsh environment. Sharing resources ensured stronger bonds and mutual aid among people who depended on each other to survive. The economy of ancient Arabia was diverse and adapted to the environment. While many people were nomadic herders, raising camels, sheep, and goats, others settled in oases or along trade routes to farm and trade. Agriculture was challenging because of the dry climate, but people developed irrigation methods and cultivated dates, barley, and wheat. Markets in towns and cities thrived with the exchange of goods from distant lands. Salt, a valuable commodity, was often traded for spices and precious metals. The trade networks connected Arabia to the wider world, including Africa, Asia, and Europe. This interconnectedness allowed cultural and technological exchanges, enriching Arabian society. Religion played a significant role in the daily life of ancient Arabs. Before the rise of Islam, many practiced polytheism, worshipping a variety of gods and spirits connected to nature, ancestors, and tribal deities. Sacred sites, such as the Kaaba in Mecca, were pilgrimage destinations even in pre-Islamic times. Poetry and oral traditions preserved religious stories, laws, and values. The belief in jinn, supernatural beings made of smokeless fire, was widespread. These spirits were thought to influence human affairs and were respected or feared. Rituals, sacrifices, and festivals helped reinforce social cohesion and the relationship between people and the divine. The architecture of ancient Arabian settlements reflected their environment and social structure. Homes were often built from mud bricks or stone, designed to keep cool in the daytime heat. Narrow streets and courtyards provided shade and privacy. In wealthier towns, markets bustled with merchants selling goods under tents and canopies. Fortified buildings protected inhabitants from raids and conflicts between tribes. The design of homes and public spaces also reflected family hierarchies and gender roles, with separate areas for men and women. Communal life revolved around shared spaces for storytelling, religious ceremonies, and trade. Clothing and personal adornment were important cultural markers in ancient Arabia. Men wore long, flowing robes called thobs, often paired with head coverings like the kafia or gutra to shield from sun and sand. Women's clothing included loose dresses and veils, often decorated with embroidery or jewelry. Jewelry made from silver, gold, and precious stones was popular and symbolized wealth and status. Tattoos and henna were also used for decoration and protection. These customs varied across regions and tribes but shared a focus on modesty, practicality, and beauty. The desert environment shaped these styles as much as cultural traditions did. Education in ancient Arabia was mostly oral, passed down through poetry, stories, and memorization. Children learned practical skills from their families, such as herding, farming, and crafting. Poetry was especially important as a way to preserve history, law, and values. Skilled poets were respected and often acted as spokespeople for their tribes. Literacy was not widespread, but certain cities became centers of learning and culture. Knowledge of astronomy, medicine, and navigation was valued, particularly for travelers and merchants. The oral tradition ensured that even in the absence of formal schools, knowledge survived across generations. Food in ancient Arabia was simple but nourishing, adapted to what the land and trade provided. Dates were a staple, packed with energy and easy to store. Bread made from barley or wheat accompanied meals, often dipped in honey or olive oil. Meat from goats, sheep, and camels was eaten during special occasions or when available. Milk, especially from camels, was an important source of nutrition. Spices such as cumin, coriander, and cinnamon came from trade routes and flavored dishes. Meals were communal events, strengthening family and tribal bonds. Water was the most precious drink, though herbal infusions and fermented drinks were sometimes consumed. Music and dance were integral to celebrations and rituals in ancient Arabia. Instruments like the oud, a stringed instrument, drums, and flutes accompanied poetry recitals and social gatherings. Songs told stories of heroes, love, and the desert. Dance varied between tribes and regions but often involved rhythmic movements mimicking daily life or natural elements like the wind. These performances were not just entertainment but a way to pass down history and strengthen community ties. Celebrations after successful hunts, harvests, or trade expeditions brought people together, providing relief from the daily hardships of desert life. The winter months in ancient Arabia, though milder than in many other regions, still posed challenges for survival. Nights could become very cold, and rain was scarce but critical. People prepared by reinforcing their shelters and stockpiling food and water. Fire was essential for warmth and cooking, so wood and dried animal dung were carefully gathered and preserved. Families and tribes would gather together in communal spaces, sharing warmth and stories. The desert wind, called the shamal, could bring sudden cold storms, reminding people of nature's power and the importance of community resilience. As the seasons shifted and time continued its slow rhythm across the desert, the daily life of ancient Arab communities followed familiar, patient routines. Each day began early, before the sun's heat dominated the land. The first light of dawn was a time of quiet preparation. Men would often set out with their herds, guiding goats or camels toward grazing areas, while women began their household work, grinding grain, tending to children, and fetching water from nearby wells or cisterns if available. Children played close to their homes, learning by watching their elders. Little by little, they were taught how to carry water on their heads, to help milk animals, or to listen attentively to the elders' stories during meals or evening gatherings. There were no clocks, no pressing appointments. Life followed the sun and the seasons, the rhythm of need and rest. Cloth was spun and woven by hand, sometimes dyed using plants or minerals found in the environment. Leather was tanned and used for shoes, water bags, and ropes. Tools were maintained, sharpened, and passed down. Few things were wasted. Even worn-out fabric might be reused as padding or patchwork. These daily acts of maintenance and creation were quiet and repetitive, but essential to the community's survival. As the day wore on, the sun reached its peak, and a stillness often settled across the land. In the hottest hours, people rested. Some found shade beneath tents, while others laid quietly indoors. This midday pause was not just tradition, it was necessity, a shared understanding with nature itself. In the silence, only the distant calls of animals or the faint flapping of fabric in the breeze could be heard. When evening returned and the air cooled, life gently resumed. Fires were lit, meals were shared, usually simple stews, flatbreads, and milk. Around these fires, people talked about the day, recited poetry, or sat in comfortable silence. Stars emerged, clear and sharp in the dry desert air. The sky became a canopy of guidance and wonder. Travelers used constellations to navigate, while others simply looked up in contemplation. This slow, predictable life, shaped by need, community, and environment, offered a kind of peace. With fewer distractions, people were more attuned to their surroundings, to the passing of time, and to one another. In this quiet world, survival and simplicity walked hand in hand. As moonlight bathed the desert sands, many families in ancient Arabia settled into the quiet rhythms of night. Homes, whether made of stone, mud brick, or woven goat hair, stood silent against the breeze, their interiors dimly lit by oil lamps or gently glowing embers left from the evening fire. The smell of smoke, earth, and worn fabric lingered faintly in the still air. In these hours, the world slowed down even further. Children, tucked into simple bedding of woven mats or animal hides, lay beneath the faint crackling of cooling coals. Elders might murmur a final prayer or blessing before drifting into sleep, their hands folded gently over their chests. Dreams came easily to the tired, dreams not of faraway adventures, but of rain, of a good harvest, of safe travel, and of peace. Sleep in ancient Arabia was often segmented. In some households, people would rise for a short while during the night, to check on livestock, to pray, or to think in the quiet stillness. Then they would return to bed again, letting the darkness stretch out its calm hours. This intermittent sleep was seen not as an inconvenience, but as a natural rhythm of life, shaped by the silence of the night and the needs of the body. For those who stayed awake longer, perhaps a shepherd listening for wolves, or a mother comforting a restless child, the night was not lonely. The stars, ever present and gleaming across the endless sky, seemed almost close enough to touch. Constellations known for generations offered both navigation and comfort, their familiar patterns part of every life. Outside the villages or camps, traders might be making slow progress along moonlit paths, their camels swaying in the cool night. The creak of saddles and soft thuds of hooves were the only sounds. In the deep desert, movement often occurred at night to avoid the punishing sun. These quiet caravans were a lifeline between communities, carrying salt, dates, spices, and stories from distant lands. Back in the homes, sleep returned softly. It was not hurried or interrupted by alarms. The night was long and unbroken by artificial light. Bodies rested deeply, and minds drifted into dreamscapes shaped by daily life, legends, and prayers. This gentle, natural way of sleeping, with pauses and peace, reminds us that rest was not a luxury but a necessity, shaped by the rhythm of the earth. And as the stars watched silently overhead, life in ancient Arabia moved forward slowly, one quiet breath at a time. In the early morning hours, just before the first light of dawn, the desert air remained cool and crisp. The stars had not yet faded, and the moon cast a pale silver sheen over the gently undulating sands. In the small village nestled beside a dry wadi, the world began to stir quietly. Not with alarm or rush, but with the slow unfolding of a new day. In one home, Fatima, the matron of the family, moved carefully through the shadows. Her feet were bare on the smooth earthen floor. She stirred the ashes of the hearth, coaxing the fire back to life with dry twigs and a practiced hand. A pot of water was set to warm, and with it came the faintest aroma of herbs, a morning infusion meant to awaken the body gently. Beside her, her husband Malik stepped outside to greet the day in his own way. With a cloth draped over his shoulder and a wooden staff in hand, he moved toward the animal pen. The goats stirred at his presence, soft bleats breaking the stillness. Their breath clouded the air briefly, then vanished like the last remnants of night. In another corner of the settlement, the elderly sat in quiet reflection. Morning was often the time for remembrance and prayer. With worn beads between their fingers, they recited verses or hummed soft melodies, their minds drifting between memory and devotion. The rhythm of the beads mirrored the steady heartbeat of the community, enduring, thoughtful, slow. Children were the last to rise. Some shifted beneath woven blankets, reluctant to leave the warmth. Others sat upright, their hair tousled, rubbing their eyes and blinking into the dimness. There were no bells or shouts to rouse them. The day called gently, allowing each soul to greet it in their own time. As the horizon brightened with soft pastels, the community began its daily motions. Some prepared for the fields, their tools simple but reliable. Others packed woven goods or spices to bring to the nearby market. Every task had its rhythm, learned over years of repetition and passed down through quiet example rather than instruction. The marketplace, though still hours from full activity, already showed signs of life. Merchants spread out their goods, dates, wool, herbs, pottery. They chatted in low tones, exchanging stories as much as wares. Even in trade, there was patience. No shouting, no urgency. Just the calm knowledge that the day would unfold as it always had. In the desert, life did not move quickly. The pace was set by nature, by the sun, by the wind, by the shifting of the sands. People moved with it, not against it. They listened to the silence, respected the heat, and embraced the stillness when it came. This slow morning, full of quiet rituals and small movements, reminds us that life in ancient Arabia was not defined by grand events or noise. It was built on patience, on care, and on the enduring beauty of living simply, in tune with the world around you. As the sun slowly climbed higher in the pale blue sky, the village eased into its daily rhythm. Life in ancient Arabia was not hurried, it unfolded like the desert itself, steady and vast, shaped more by the elements than by the ticking of any clock. People followed the sun, the wind, and the habits passed down through generations. Mid-morning in the village brought a gentle shift in energy. The warmth grew, but the air still carried the coolness of the night. Families gathered beneath awnings or near the walls of their homes, where the shadows lingered a little longer. Conversations remained soft, often spoken in half-whispers, as though out of respect for the quiet of the land. At the center of the village, the communal well became a place of soft gathering. Women arrived with clay pots balanced on their hips or shoulders. They exchanged greetings with nods and low words, drawing water with practiced care. The creak of the pulley and the splash of water were among the few sounds that echoed in the stillness. Children sometimes played nearby, drawing shapes in the dust or watching small beetles trail across the ground. Inside one modest home, Malik sat cross-legged beside a woven mat. Before him lay tools made of bone, wood, and iron, simple instruments used for repair and craft. He worked slowly, binding leather straps for a harness, his fingers moving with quiet certainty. His wife, Fatima, ground grains into flour, the rhythmic scrape of stone on stone, a sound older than any language. A breeze drifted through the village, stirring the loose edges of cloth and carrying the scent of warm earth and herbs. In this part of the day, the world seemed held in a kind of balance, not fully awake, not quite resting. It was a time for work, but also for reflection. No one rushed. There was time for everything, eventually. In the shade of a fig tree, elders gathered. They did not speak much. Their silence was not empty but full of presence. Occasionally, one would share a memory, a proverb, or a tale from decades past, not as entertainment, but as gentle instruction. In ancient Arabian life, stories were not simply told. They were lived again in the telling. Younger members of the village took notice of these quiet exchanges. Though they may have seemed distracted, fiddling with rope or tracing lines in the dust, they listened. Learning came not from lessons but from nearness. Watching how bread was baked, how camels were groomed, how the stars were used to guide. Everything meaningful came from patience and attention. By midday, the sun stood high and bold. Many returned indoors or to shaded courtyards, pausing their labor in respect to the heat. This was a time for rest, prayer, or stillness. The silence grew deeper, as even the birds and animals slowed their movement. It is easy, in modern times, to imagine ancient life as hard and unforgiving. And surely, there were hardships. But in these long, quiet mornings, there was also a kind of wisdom, a way of living that asked for little and offered much in return. Stillness was not emptiness, and silence was not loneliness. In the vastness of the desert, every sound and every gesture held weight. And so the day continued, unhurried. Just as it had the day before, and the day before that. Each movement, each word, and each moment was part of something much larger, a rhythm as old as the sands themselves. The desert, with its endless expanse and ancient winds, shaped not only the land but the very souls of those who lived within it. As the afternoon sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the dunes and the flat rooftops of the village, life shifted into a quieter mode. The heat remained, but the light softened, painting everything in warm hues of amber and gold. Inside the homes made of mud brick and stone, the thick walls kept the heat at bay. The rooms were dim, lit only by the muted rays slipping through narrow windows or wooden shutters. Within one such home, a young woman named Zainab was preparing the evening meal. She moved slowly and calmly, slicing dried dates and mixing them with goat cheese. Her hands were practiced and sure, each gesture passed down through generations of women before her. Outside, her younger brother, Yusuf, was gathering dried dung for the fire. It was a simple task, but one that mattered. In a land where trees were rare, fuel came from what could be gathered, preserved, and used sparingly. Yusuf worked with care, stacking the dried pieces neatly near the family hearth, aware that each handful would warm them later when the desert's chill crept in. The village was quiet in these hours. Even the animals, tied in shaded stalls or led to water earlier in the day, seemed to rest. A distant bleating of goats or the occasional bray of a donkey were soft notes in the larger hush. Above, a falcon circled slowly, its shadow gliding over rooftops and stone. In another corner of the village, Malik and a few other men sat near the edge of the well, not to draw water but to speak. Their conversation, like everything else, was unhurried. They talked of the wind patterns, of a cousin's wedding in a nearby settlement, of whether rain might come this season. No words were wasted. Silence filled the spaces between sentences, not awkward, but companionable. As the light deepened into dusk, preparations for the evening prayer began. A soft call echoed from the village's highest roof, not loud, but clear. One by one, figures emerged from homes and shaded corners, heading to the small mosque or simply laying out mats toward the west. Prayer was not only a religious act, it was part of the day's structure, a shared pause in the quiet march of time. Later, as twilight settled over the land, families gathered to eat. The meal was simple: flatbread, lentils, dates, perhaps a little meat if the week had been kind. Children sat quietly beside their parents, learning the rhythms of conversation, of gratitude, of stillness. There was no rush. Stories might be shared, softly spoken tales of ancestors, of travels across the sand, of how the stars were once used to find hidden wells. Night descended with its familiar chill. The desert cooled quickly, and thin blankets were pulled from woven baskets. Fires were lit, more for comfort than cooking. Zainab, now finished with her tasks, sat beside her mother. They said little, but the silence between them was deep and warm, like the folds of a well-worn cloak. In ancient Arabia, life did not need noise to feel full. The world breathed in slow, deliberate rhythm, shaped by sun, sand, and stars. And as night deepened and the sky shimmered with countless lights, the village settled once more into peace. A peace that, in its quiet strength, had endured for centuries. The stillness of the desert night was profound, broken only by the faint rustling of wind against the palm fronds and the occasional low murmur of voices from within the homes. In the heart of the village, under the starlit sky, the air carried the faint scent of smoke from hearth fires, mixed with the sweet aroma of dried herbs that hung near doorways. These scents told quiet stories of comfort, survival, and routine. In the home of Zainab and her family, the fire had dwindled to glowing embers. The meal was over, the bowls cleaned and set aside. Her mother sat beside the hearth, slowly spinning wool into thread with a spindle passed down from her own mother. The gentle whir of the spindle and the occasional crackle of fire were the only sounds in the room. Zainab was sewing by lamplight, repairing a tunic that Yusef had torn while climbing a tree to rescue a frightened goat earlier that week. Her needle moved steadily, rhythmically, guided by habit and care. The cloth was rough, but strong, dyed a dusty ochre from pomegranate rinds and saffron powder, giving it a warmth that stood out even in dim light. Outside, the village was not asleep yet. In some homes, laughter flickered briefly, and in others, the low tones of stories being told by elders could be heard through the thin walls. These tales were more than entertainment, they were teachings. Myths of the jinn, accounts of long journeys, and parables about wise rulers or foolish men. Each one a thread in the vast, invisible tapestry that tied generations together. A few boys sat in the square, leaning against a cool stone wall, their legs stretched out, their voices low. They dreamed of distant cities, of caravan routes, of camels laden with spices and silks, of merchants who'd seen oceans and snow. Their fathers had told them such stories, and though many had never left the village, their imaginations had already wandered far beyond the dunes. The village's animals, too, had found their rest. The goats curled together for warmth, the donkey leaned against a wooden post, half asleep, its ears occasionally twitching. Chickens nested quietly in their coop. The night was theirs as much as it was the people's, a time of stillness and peace after the long, hot hours of the day. Above, the stars shone brightly, clearer than in any city, undimmed by smoke or torchlight. The constellations were well known to the villagers. They guided shepherds, marked the seasons, and served as an unchanging canvas in a world that, though slow, was always shifting. Children learned the stars' names early, often falling asleep beneath their glow during warm nights spent on rooftops. Malik, the village elder, sat alone near the well, wrapped in a heavy cloak. He watched the stars as he had done for decades. His thoughts were not hurried, but wandered gently across years and memories. He remembered harvests and famines, weddings and funerals, faces long gone and voices that only lived in dreams. Yet he found comfort in the constancy of the desert, its vastness, its silence, and the community that endured within it. In Zainab's home, the lamp was now dim. She folded the tunic carefully and placed it beside her brother's sleeping mat. Her mother's spindle was still, her breathing slow and even. Zainab pulled a woven shawl around her shoulders and lay down, the clay floor cool against her back. She stared at the ceiling, listening to the quiet until sleep came. In this ancient place, under an eternal sky, the people of the village lived lives of quiet perseverance. They found beauty in routine, in simplicity, and in each other. And as the night deepened, the desert once again became a place of dreams, soft, slow, and filled with the enduring rhythm of forgotten centuries. The morning in the village began not with a blaring sound, but with a slow stir, the whisper of the wind against the cloth-covered windows, the gentle groan of wood as doors were pushed open, and the low bleating of goats eager to be fed. Sunlight slowly spilled over the desert dunes, bathing the homes in a golden hue that seemed almost sacred. Zainab awoke to the familiar warmth of morning light on her face. She stretched quietly, careful not to disturb her siblings, still curled under their woven blankets. The aroma of brewing kahwa, strong, spiced coffee, drifted through the small home, letting her know that her mother had already begun the day's tasks. Outside, the village was beginning to breathe. Women swept the dust from doorsteps with bunches of palm fronds. Children carried clay jars to the well, careful not to spill water on their bare feet. The rhythmic creak-splash creak of the pulley echoed softly as buckets were drawn up. Water was precious, not just for thirst, but for life itself. Every drop carried effort and meaning. At the edge of the village, men gathered near the camels, preparing for a day's travel to a nearby market town. They secured bundles of dates, nuts, salt, and dyed cloth, goods the village produced in modest quantities, to be traded for tools, spices, or rare luxuries. The camels stood calmly, their long lashes fluttering as flies danced in the warm air. Yusuf was helping his uncle repair a section of the garden wall that had been worn down by last month's windstorm. He carried stones one by one, placing them carefully, while his uncle mixed clay and straw for mortar. It was slow work, but the kind that invited quiet conversation. About planting times, family stories, and dreams of building a larger home someday. In the shade of a fig tree, Zainab sat beside her mother, sorting lentils for the midday meal. It was a meditative task. Each pebble removed was like a thought gently plucked from the mind. As they worked, they discussed the changing weather, the dreams they'd had, and the preparations for the coming celebration of the crescent moon, a time of poetry, music, and shared meals beneath the stars. A group of young girls gathered nearby with scraps of cloth and colored thread. They were practicing embroidery, learning to stitch familiar patterns, the eye for protection, the crescent for blessings, the gazelle for grace. These designs had been passed down like silent songs, each stitch carrying echoes of mothers and grandmothers long gone. As the sun rose higher, the heat became more insistent. Shade was sought, work slowed. The village quieted again, not in sleep, but in calm adaptation. Meals were shared in the coolest corners of homes, often without speaking, only the sounds of chewing, the rustle of dates being unwrapped, and clay cups passed from hand to hand. Later in the afternoon, elders gathered beneath the large acacia tree to discuss matters of the community. There was talk of a new well, of repairing the mosque's roof, of a distant cousin's arrival from another village. These meetings were not rushed. Decisions unfolded like the shadow of the sun across the courtyard, slowly, deliberately, always with respect for time. Evening approached with a quiet grace. The sun slipped behind the dunes, and a breeze brought relief. Lamps were lit with olive oil, casting flickering gold onto the walls. The air carried smells of lentils, herbs, and warm flatbread. Children played briefly before being called inside, their laughter lingering like smoke in the cooling air. As the stars emerged, the people of the village settled into rest. Blankets were laid out on rooftops, prayers were whispered, and silence descended once more. It was not the silence of emptiness, but of peace, the stillness earned from a day well spent in harmony with the land, the people, and the passing of time.